And so we're going to hear from Clarence Thomas from San Francisco, from Local 10 of the International Longshore and Warehouse Workers Union in the Bay Area, a grand tradition of labor militancy and political action there. He will be followed by Denis Lemelin from one of the most progressive unions in this country, the Canadian Union of Postal Workers, the president of the Canadian Union of Postal Workers, and then by Tariq Ali, who needs no introduction, I believe. So I want to start with Clarence Thomas.
The ILWU was really born in 1934 with the general strike that took place in San Francisco around the question of dock workers on the West Coast having the right to have a union hall and a collective bargaining agreement. And during that time, African Americans, by and large, could only work on the waterfront in the Bay Area when there was a labor dispute. So essentially, they were working as scabs. One of the things that Harry Bridges learned very quickly was that in order to win that struggle in 1934, he needed to have the support of the black community. And so what he did was he asked pastors, both in San Francisco and Oakland, to be allowed to go to their churches to speak, where he made an appeal that if black men and women joined the picket line, that he would do all that he possibly could to make sure that blacks would be members of the ILWU. At that time, we were the ILA. He was making the connection that the destiny of white workers was inextricably linked to black workers. It is important for people to understand, just very quickly here, about the history of the ILWU. One of the things that separates our union from any other union in the United States of America is that we've taken positions on matters of foreign policy. We were one of the first unions to protest the Korean War, one of the first to protest the war in Vietnam. Came out very early with respect to Desert Storm in 1991. And of course, just this past May, we shut down all the ports on the West Coast, the first time in American history that workers have engaged in a strike to protest a matter of foreign policy of the United States government, shutting down all cargo movement on the West Coast. One of the things that I really need to make very clear to you is that aside from Local 10 being the home of the legendary Harry Bridges, it is also the most racially diverse longshore local on the West Coast. In longshore parlance, we're the black port. There are more blacks, more people of color, more women in the ILW Local 10 than anywhere else on the West Coast. And that is a tribute to our legacy. What people should understand very clearly is that the ILWU, Local 10 in particular, has been in the vanguard of some of the most successful worker struggles in the world. I will call your attention to 1984 in San Francisco, a place called Pier 80. There was a vessel by the name of the Ned Lloyd Kimberley carrying cargo from South Africa. A community picket line was organized. But what was really critical was that workers decided when they got dispatched to that job at Pier 80, they knew full well that they were not going to cross that picket line because there had been various resolutions that had been adopted by Local 10 membership opposing apartheid, going back to 1959, when a man by the name of William Bill Chester, who was the first African American to serve in an international union capacity, put such a resolution forward. Now, what was really critical here is that workers decided, independently of their leadership, either at the local level or at the international level, that they were not going to cross that picket line because they wanted to make a statement against apartheid in South Africa. What ensued was 10 days. We refused to work that ship, sending international shockwaves all around the world, because anytime that you disrupt international cargo, you capture the attention of not only the ruling class, Wall Street, Washington, D.C., and every other capital in the world. How dare they, these longshoremen, go against what President Reagan called constructive engagement? Our own international president at that time, a man by the name of Jimmy Herman, who was a progressive in his own right, said that this is nonsense. ILWU members, you should stay out of matters of foreign policy. But let me tell you what happened. A few months later, Jimmy Herman and other labor tops were getting themselves arrested by picketing the South African embassy in San Francisco. The pressure from down below, the rank and file, put pressure on the leadership. When Nelson Mandela was released from prison and came to the Bay Area and spoke before over 100,000 people at the Alameda County Stadium, Coliseum, as we know it, he thanked the ILWU for the work that we had done, because this set into motion a chain of events that began to put the pressure on South Africa. The whole question of divestment, because not only did we not load cargo from the Net Lloyd Kimberley, but we also went to our board of trustees and said we want to divest. We don't want to have any of our money going to companies that are doing business with South Africa. This is the power, ladies and gentlemen, of international labor solidarity from the bottom up, not the top down. As we fast forward to the number of demonstrations that have been held all over the United States protesting the war in Iraq, one of the things that was very visible to me, and I'm sure to millions of others around the world, you saw very few black faces on those podiums, at those rallies. It was ostensibly whites that you saw there. Now, what is that contradiction all about? Inasmuch as it's blacks, other people of color, and poor whites that make up the majority of those who are in the military, because they're signing up for purposes of receiving monies for education, health care, and other fundamental purposes. There's been a major disconnect. The community has not been engaged. And I submit to you that before we can have a real viable anti-war peace movement in the United States, it has to be centered in the working class. Yes. There is no question about that. We need to move from protest to resistance. This T-shirt that I'm wearing is very important to me. And the reason why it is because in October of 2004, ILWU Local 10 initiated the Million Worker March movement. It was subsequently endorsed by our international, and they put no money into this. As a matter of fact, John Sweeney, head of the AFL-CIO, issued a memo telling central labor councils and state labor federations all across the United States, while we may agree with many of the aims and objectives of the Million Worker March, we are encouraging all of our members not to devote any time to participation or give any money. Now, very quickly here, what the Million Worker March was all about was fundamentally this. We had several demands, but key amongst them was the end of the Iraq War immediately. We also talked about cutting the military budget, workers' rights, stopping the privatization of Social Security, and other issues. Issues that were fundamental to workers, be they Republicans, Democrats, anarchists, socialists, doesn't make any difference because all workers want a pension when they retire. All workers want to live in affordable housing. All workers want to live in a peaceful world. So this is fundamental to us. But the Democratic Party and the AFL-CIO did everything they possibly could to undermine this because they did not want to have any issue that was going to come up 2 weeks before the election. Standard bearer for the Democratic Party was John Kerry and John Edwards. Peace activists were supporting John Kerry, even though he was calling for a surge in 2004. He thought that he could outflank George Bush on the right and gave no concessions at all to the peace movement. The reason why I'm bringing this up is because had we not engaged in mobilizing the Million Worker March, which we did, bringing rank and filers from all over the United States of America, including trade unionists from South Africa, Japan, and Haiti, rallying at the steps of the Lincoln Memorial, the same place where Dr. King gave his famous I Have a Dream speech. That rally was not supposed to have taken place at all, brothers and sisters, because the Democratic Party and the trade union leadership did not want to arouse the expectations of the working class because they knew full well that John Kerry wasn't going to do anything for the workers. That was one of the reasons why he lost. The fundamental question for us in the United States of America is whether or not we as working people are going to be able to engage in the kind of struggle that was laid out by my forefathers who were a part of the civil rights movement when they engaged in civil disobedience. When you take action at the point of production, that is when we exercise our leverage as working people. Imagine if workers from the West Coast, East Coast, North and South on a given day would take off for peace one day. Imagine the power of that statement. It's more powerful than voting. Young people came up and asked me, Brother Clarence, are you going to support Senator Obama? I said, no. Remember, Brother Clarence went to Baghdad. Remember you all thought I was crazy? Because I put my life on the line for something that I believed in? Remember when we organized the Million Worker March? Remember the action that we took on May 1st, striking against the Iraq war and the war in Afghanistan and calling for the immediate withdrawal of those troops? I cannot support Obama. But I didn't discourage them from doing so because many of them have never been involved in the political process. But I use that opportunity to teach our young people about the positions of Senator Obama, reminding them of things that he had said during the course of his campaign. It is critical for young people to be engaged. It is also important for them to understand contradictions, because I believe that people have been empowered, especially young people, around the election of President-elect Obama. It is important for the white working class to finally vote in their self-interest. It does not mean that Obama is going to live up to his promises, but the point of it is that workers are now looking at their external conditions and see that they need an alternative. It is the challenge of us progressives to be able to lead the way by example. And that is the reason why I'm here today, to be able to go back to my local, report on what I've heard here today, and present very critical resolutions so that we can begin to put the pressure on. This is a very strategic moment in our history for workers in the United States of America. And we on the left, who call ourselves revolutionaries and progressive, learned a very important lesson. When it became known of the bailout proposal for Wall Street, the workers were way out in front of any of the so-called progressive leadership. They said, hell no, don't give them a dime. The fervor is there for change. It is now our responsibility to show some leadership and be able to lay out a fundamental program. Remember, in the United States of America, only 7% of us in the private sector belong to a union. Most of the workers in the United States do not belong to a union. They don't enjoy living wages, and that is the critical mass that we have to reach. And I submit to you that rank and filers must be now a part of the movement to go abroad and visit and talk to workers in other countries so that they can learn firsthand of the common struggle that we have. We need to move from protest to resistance. I'll say it again. We need to move from protest to resistance. We need to organize and mobilize in our own name. Black people did not get the right to vote by voting. We got the right to vote by organizing, mobilizing in our own name, independent of the two political parties. I'm going to conclude. I've just been tapped on my knee.
Because I like you.
I want to conclude with a slogan that has long been associated with my union. It's called an injury to one and an injury to all. And I would like for all of you to join me in saying it 3 times. Ready? An injury to one is an injury to all. An injury to one is an injury to all. An injury to one is an injury to all. Thank you.